Hello and welcome back to Rand Rant. Today I'm excited to be joined by Eric Johnson, the CEO of SurveyMonkey. However, this one it's a little bit different. I've never had the chance or opportunity to interview someone from the same company I work for. So I'm really looking forward to getting to chat with Eric today and I suppose starting things off. How is all with you today, Eric?
Things are good. I'm really excited to be here. I love that you've been doing this for so long and appreciate you having me on.
No worries. It's an absolute pleasure. And I cannot thank you enough for taking time out of no doubt your busy schedule. So
Absolutely.
I will keep this clear, concise, and to the point. So starting off, normally I have guests on and I talk throughout their childhoods and God knows what else life will throw at you between the ages of 1 and 18. But I'd rather maybe start where you went to kind of university. You went to Princeton, which is one of, I suppose, the top universities in the world. And I suppose when you think back on that and you reflect on your time there, what ultimately stuck with you the most? Was it the academic side of things, or was it maybe some of those life lessons that every young man tends to pick up during their college years, trying to ultimately survive everything outside the lecture halls?
Yeah. I I was lucky. I got into a school that is completely a crapshoot for everybody and
Mm.
has just gotten harder and harder every year. I'm certain I would not get into Princeton at this point. But it was great. It was eye opening in spending time with that many smart, interesting, fun people. The most important thing, to be totally frank, is the friends that I met and am still really close with all these years later. But the exposure to professors that were people whose textbooks I had read in high school and was using, and the access to the research facilities, it was just a very different world. I grew up going to public school, and it was I was on the West Coast in California, and going to the East Coast just felt like a brand new world to me, and a bit daunting at first, but settled in. And I mean, it really was an amazing experience for me, and a lot of it was what you said, which is the growing up, learning about yourself. Those years from 18 to 22, pretty formative, and spending it with a whole bunch of people your own age is a pretty amazing experience.
Yeah, I suppose I'll have it on the record. One of my biggest regrets was not putting absolutely everything I had into my college life. So whenever I deal with 18, 19 year olds here in Ireland, I just tell them make the absolute most of it because you don't certainly get it
You
back.
don't
So
get it back, and I'd be a much better student now than I was then. I'd love to read.
yeah,
I didn't, there were definitely things I look back and wish I could redo, and conversations I wish I had with professors, but it was fantastic.
yeah, it's part of the learning experience, I
For sure.
suppose. And you could do nearly a podcast within itself on everything you did professionally leading up to your current role with SurveyMonkey, whether it was with JP Morgan, Wolfgang's Vault. There's a vast array of companies you've been involved in. And I suppose I alluded to it. You've worked with high stakes finance roles, creative media, the music industry to an extent, and now you're in the fast moving tech world. When you reflect on all these roles in your current role, is there a particular skill that has served you well in all of those roles? That's very much, you can see it evident in every single role you've had up until this point.
Yeah, I think that constant curiosity is the one thing that has served me well. I love to learn. I love to figure out new things. I love the details, understanding how things work, how companies run, what are the drivers and the levers. Some of that came from banking and spending a lot of time pouring through financial statements and understanding a variety of companies across different industries. I was lucky to be involved in that first .com boom and seeing the creation of a lot of what we see as some of the biggest companies in the world today. And I don't think I had a distinct plan for, I shouldn't say I don't think, I know I didn't have a distinct plan for any of this. I was in banking for 11 years and decided I wanted to try something different and thought about going to the operating side. And biggest focus for me was finding a company small enough that I could get a chance to have a say in the way things were run and what was going on. And found a really interesting little business, Wolfgang's Vault, and then wanted something bigger for my next step to expand my horizons. And so I think that the key has been both the willingness to try different things and the curiosity to learn both from the people who were there and from other sources outside.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's something that is quite common. I've had a huge amount of guests and many CEOs even on the podcast, and there tends to be that pivotal moment where they look like they're going in a certain direction, or even some of the sports athletes I've had on, it looks like they're working a 9 to 5 job, then suddenly something happens, and 2 years later they're UFC champions or something crazy like that. When you pivoted into, or sorry, away from the financial
Yeah.
world, I should say, you mentioned there that you wanted to kind of try something yourself. There was maybe a niche you needed to scratch there. Was that purely a personal thing, or was that a friend saying it? Was it a circumstance? Was it family? Like, what kind of kicked you into that initial pivot?
Yeah, it was a personal thing. I had, this is 2005, so I was recently married. My wife had a good job, and I had this moment of, as you get farther into the financial world, the income ticks up and you start to get in that golden handcuff type world. And I didn't want to do one thing for my career. There's a lot of value in that. And I've got friends who were I worked with back then that are still there and incredibly successful and happy with the choice. I wanted to try something new, and we had the flexibility to look and to take some time to do that. And so it really was about, both my good fortune to be able to go look around and find something that, frankly was not as lucrative, and take a bet on something. And I thought I knew what it meant to run and manage a team and a business because I'd worked closely with a lot of companies. But until you're in it, doing it day to day and working with people and the variety of personalities and the variety of things that you need to do to motivate and help people along, it's really hard to understand the differences of being on the outside advisory world and then on the inside of helping manage and operate a business.
And would I be right in saying during your time with, say, Wolfgang, for example, it wasn't just the high level stuff that you were worrying about, the boardroom stuff you'd see in the movies? You were doing some of the nitty gritty groundwork. Like, were you doing quite a top to bottom role within that at certain stages? Like, especially when you said there it was starting off.
Yeah, I think we were 15 or 16 people when I joined, and it was a mix of everything from helping work with product and engineering and design to building out some new ideas for growing the business to negotiating acquisitions, and then folding t-shirts and doing customer service calls. And the mix was everything. I mean, literally in the back rooms, sorting tapes with the team on weekends. We were recording new artists, and so some of this was just moving music equipment out of the vans into the studio. And it was great. It was great to get a sense of all the elements that went into the business and realizing how important every step along the way is and what that means for the product you're putting out, the customer interaction, the value of people who care. And I just, the I don't know if the language is okay, but I just have a strong belief in people who give a shit and can get things done. And if you combine those two, they're some of the most successful people I've seen anywhere. That it's not just about raw intelligence. It's not just about the connections or the way people think. It really is about that care in what you're doing, understanding how to do it, and getting things done.
Yeah, for sure. And in my first several weeks, even here at SurveyMonkey, where we're basically battling day to day to get feedback across to potential customers and listening to their feedback, whether it's about products, integrations, price, and you name it. It's such an important, I suppose, area of dialogue and one's role within a company. And one of the questions I was thinking about in relation to having you on, obviously, was you've had many roles in many different industries, and now at SurveyMonkey, I hear the word feedback every single
Yeah.
day, whether it's on a cold call or an internal meeting or even on a Slack channel. When you look back to this point, do you like look back and see a moment where it could have been a colleague, a friend, a family member provided you with potentially positive or negative feedback, and that had a profound effect on you and how you say lead today?
Yeah. I'll give you two. One was positive, which was we finished an IPO when I was young. I mean, I was 23, I think. And due to scheduling circumstances, I basically had to be the sole person managing the deal. And the CEO of the company said on the pricing call, which is the end call, said, we always heard how awful this process was and what a pain it was, and it was fun, and we loved it because Eric made it interesting and fun. And fun is not what it's supposed to be about, right? It's supposed to be about getting the best deal
Yeah.
for the client but you realize that people want to enjoy themselves. They want to have these moments of levity, and that part of your job anywhere, whether that's on the sales side or the support side or a product, I don't care, is that you want people to have a good experience in what they're doing. It makes a difference in their job. I've never believed in the value of being a jerk manager that people live with fear of getting things done. I think that the value is in inspiring people to be excited about their work. And it's not always perfect, but I do think that piece stuck with me, of making that entire experience a bit better for a management team through a stressful process, was great. The flip side was also back in banking early on, when we worked a lot of hours. It was just what you did. We worked till midnight most nights during the week, and we worked Saturdays and Sundays, and we just didn't know any differently. And so that's what you did. We were out of college, and it was a first job. And I probably talked about that too much, how much I was working. And I got feedback from our vice president, who was in charge of staffing the group of us who were the analysts. And she said point blank, Eric does good work, but he seems to talk about how much he works too much. And that it was a really good eye opener of just shut up and do the work and let that speak for itself. Now, you need to be an advocate for yourself, and you need to make sure that it's clear that you're working. But
Yeah.
there's a fine line between where that becomes too much, and I had gone way too far. And so it was a powerful statement, and I was glad to hear it. I mean, I wasn't glad to hear it in the moment, but I
Yeah.
was grateful for it later.
Okay. It comes back a little bit to the self praise is no praise
Yeah,
piece.
exactly.
Yeah. You see that in a lot of sports coaches. They try to avoid saying, "Oh, I've worked really hard and I've done so well." It's always about the players, or deflecting from their actual responsibilities and effort, which obviously are there and very important. But I suppose as a worker, it is something that you shouldn't necessarily have to scream from the rooftops.
It's exactly right. And there's a balance, right? I mean, people should advocate for themselves, and they should make sure that that's clear. that they're doing good work. But I think you're right. The ones who really shine are the ones who are deflecting that and sharing the praise, and that makes the difference in the long run.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And most recently, it won't be a shock for me to dive into this, as I have done a bit of LinkedIn stalking and having worked with SurveyMonkey a few months now. I do know the history of the company to some extent right now, but you would have come in during, I suppose, from the outside looking in, STG came in. They changed the name back to SurveyMonkey. It was called Momentum before that. You were announced as CEO. Normally, and this again might come back to my Hollywood prescription of things, but CEOs sometimes would like to have their names in lights when they get announced as in these big positions. But with yours, it was a rather understated joint announcement along with the STG acquiring of SurveyMonkey. I suppose, was that part of the plan? How did you find that, or was it part of the what we just discussed about you're in here to do a job? There doesn't need to be a huge amount of media attention around it. I just want to go in, hit the ground running, and start changing things for the better.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I haven't really thought about that. I am not somebody who seeks the limelight, spotlight. I don't think that that is valuable unless it's valuable for the company. And so I don't need to be out there. I'm not looking to do conference circuits or all these things to push my personal brand. I do think there's value for the company in humanizing what we do. I think there's value for our customers and buyers to understand who's managing the business, how that works across the board. Our team, I think we can do more in social media. We've talked a lot about this and just getting some people out there. We've got a great group across the board. And I think as a company, going back for years, SurveyMonkey is the sort of for software companies has a very humble persona, which I love. And you don't usually equate that with winning success in software, where it's cutthroat world, where it's very competitive, and there's a brashness to a lot of people in the industry. And I think we could rotate a couple degrees, not flip it 180. But I think that was consistent with the thinking there. And again, it really wasn't either let's talk about Eric coming in or let's just focus on the deal and move forward. I think it really was that I had a shared vision with STG in the core principles and the core reasons for their investment. And so we agreed on the name going back to SurveyMonkey. We agreed on the core principles. It was really about how we define and refine the product going forward and the opportunities to go after. So I think a lot of that just happened fairly naturally. And then again, it wasn't like we were out there looking to generate a whole bunch of buzz right then. It was so much more about what can we do for our customers? What can we do for the team, for the business? And we had to make some changes that were fairly meaningful over those first year and a half or so. And let's focus on those, certainly not on me.
Yeah, no, fair. And when you arrived in SurveyMonkey, culture is the biggest buzzword, whether it's in sports, whether it's in any sort of industry. It's one that's used a lot. But when you initially came in as CEO, was there something that you learned pretty quickly about SurveyMonkey's internal culture that either surprised you for better or worse after becoming CEO?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that I love and have loved about the culture and have felt a responsibility to preserve. One of which is that it's generally and genuinely a kind group of people. Goes along with that humility I talked about earlier. And I think that comes from years of different CEOs and managers and founders who instilled that. They hired nice people, and they tended to hire other nice people. And the other piece of it that I think is really important is that it's a culture of experimentation. So understanding what works and then going after ways to improve that and doing that at scale and finding ways both in the platform, in the processes to go after the experimentation. I think the pieces that we need to work on are the flip side, that when you have strengths, they often expose where you've got opportunities. And so that kindness culture, in some cases, means that people weren't pushing as hard as they could have. And that, interestingly, in a company built on feedback, you could do more and you can make sure that you are providing that constructive feedback and ways to do that and trying to push that into the culture more. And then the same thing on the experimentation side. There's a way to over rotate on that takes you down this path of local maximization as opposed to thinking about the wholesale opportunity and ways that you can make bigger changes, and in some cases bets on the product, the marketing, the sales, these opportunities that are real, that don't necessarily require lots of experiments to get there. And so there's again, I love that those two sides of the culture, and there's opportunities that we've had and continue to have to improve pieces there.
Yeah, I'd absolutely echo that. And I've been fortunate enough to work with several blue chip companies. And I think this is a perfect example of it, Eric. The fact that you were kind enough to take time out of your day to have a chat. And I suppose, like the first few weeks in SurveyMonkey, I was pretty much taken aback about how open everyone was. There wasn't massive egos charging around the office. It felt like a very open and kind space, but equally, where there was some key stakeholders coming into the Dublin office, they were very welcoming. They'd share a donut with you, but equally they would talk about performance and realize that as much as donuts taste nice, they do taste nicer from a sales point of view anyway, if your attainment looks
Yeah.
good. So getting that balance right is something that so far anyway, I can definitely agree with you with, and that it seems like a very collaborative, but also in favor of feedback type of culture, which I think is definitely going to put us in a good way heading into the next few
Yeah, I
years,
love to hear
hopefully.
that.
But
Appreciate you sharing that.
no worries. And one of the things I remember when I was even doing the interview process for SurveyMonkey, and even a few years ago, I interviewed when it was Momentive, and when I told people, oh, I'm interviewing for Momentive, they were like, I've never heard of that
Right.
company. What are they? And then I'd say, oh, it's like SurveyMonkey. And they're like, oh, I know that. So you referenced it there that when you came in, like with pretty much every major tech company, there had to be some significant changes to the product, whether it was leadership, there was layoffs. With all that happening, how do you personally, anyway, measure trust within the company, which is obviously SurveyMonkey, and how do you personally work to restore and maintain it after these challenging transitions, which every company goes through at some stage?
Yeah, I think that there's a combination of the the feedback cycles that we work through, which is the business that we're in, and collecting feedback is critical, both individual and at scale, and communication. I think there's an element of transparency that we've tried to instill in the company, which is we're going to share lots of information, good and bad. And it's not perfect. I mean, the world is changing and shifting. We came out of a cycle into COVID where you had the SaaS software market overall had crazy valuations, and the focus was only on revenue growth. And the company's plans were built around that. Now, it was profitable and it was a good business, but there were lines of business that were less profitable than others, some losing money, others that just didn't make sense where we wanted to go down the road. And we had to make hard decisions. And with those come, like you said, job changes and structuring. And those are times that absolutely impact trust and people's security in the job. And so the goal is, one, to focus on the things we can do to control and win where we can, making sure that we're moving with a sense of urgency and that transparency. I don't know what more we can do than that, at the outset, and then to keep building on that and continue to have some consistency and results, I think, are the things that drive both the trust and the optimism that you need to run any company of any size. I don't care if it's 5 people or 1,000 plus. It takes that collective spirit to drive it forward, and it comes from a combination of so many things. And I think we are better, and lots of work to do still for us, for any company as you're going through transitions. We have an interesting structure. We've got a number of offices around the globe, and it makes communication sometimes challenging. Sometimes you feel like there's delays, just time zones and offices and people spread out. And so we work hard to work through that, but it can be a challenge for sure.
Yeah. No, trying to get a podcast sorted when you're battling the West Coast to sunny Dublin. Yeah. I'm kind of lying when I say that. It's more so sunny Cali as opposed to sunny Dublin.
Look, I'm in San Francisco. We have not seen the sun this summer. It's been the coldest summer in 30 years. So I'm with you.
Okay, fair. And with these decisions that every single day in every job anyone does, but relating to your job specifically, you must have to make some small decisions, some major decisions. Do you have a specific process, whether it's personally or within your team, or it could be even an external thing? I know on podcasts you've said you sometimes go for a run to kind of get rid of the fog and really focus on maybe a key decision you'd have to make. But is there a specific process you would go through when making maybe a company-wide decision that will affect many people?
Yeah, I think that it starts with having groups of people that you trust for that conversation, that you are making that decision with as much information as possible. And that's a combination of different viewpoints, of data that informs that decision, and then an understanding of the impacts of that decision. And at the end of the day, my job is to make sure that we are making decisions, in some cases being the tiebreaker, in some cases driving the direction. And I think that I do my best to listen without prejudice. I certainly have, I love the notion of having strong opinions loosely held. And I'm not sure I do that perfectly all the time, but I do try and listen to the opposing side of an argument and think about ways we can do things differently. And I think that to me, that's the key. And then there's no perfect mechanism for making a decision. I think the worst thing is not making decisions. So people are stuck waiting for an answer or waiting for some direction. I do believe that for us and for almost any company, forward is a whole lot better than getting mired in the waiting and the analysis paralysis. And I think that sometimes we've got versions of that with that experimentation culture. We get stuck in looking for the perfect answer when good can be really good.
Yeah, we live in an imperfect world sometimes.
That's right.
Especially in tech. It's ever revolving. Like even bringing up COVID, and then once we got out of COVID, do we work in offices? Do we work from home? And then suddenly 2 letters of AI come around. So your best made plans are just going to be laughed at in this industry more often than not.
I think about that often. If you go back to 2019 and say, all right, the next 6 years are going to have these, life-changing, world-changing things happen. It's almost hard to believe, and yet here we are.
Yeah, here we are. And with SurveyMonkey specifically, it's a private company, and when decisions like we just discussed there need to be made, how, like, take us inside to maybe the difference between a private company and maybe a public company, and what decisions or maybe risks you'd be willing or not willing to take, considering in SurveyMonkey's case it is a private
Yeah,
company.
one of the huge benefits of being private is that you're not worried about reporting your quarterly reports. And so you're focused on the quarters. It matters from a sales team's perspective. It matters from building those quarters into good years, and then into good progress. But the pressure of reporting quarters and the impact on the stock and the impact on the value and the public perception is real. And you see that in the way people are, I think in many cases, forced to manage a public company. That cadence creates a lot of additional work layers, the reporting pieces. There's just a lot that goes into being a public company. And again, that mindset, we have the luxury of being private again and taking this mindset that says, let's do what's right for the business for the medium and long term, and make some decisions that were hard, that would have been more difficult to make as a public company, that change the structure of certain parts of the business to then find growth in other areas in that core business. But it can take a little bit of time to realize that, and you're still focused on the same outcomes, which is all about growing the business profitably. And so those are consistent whether you're public or private. But the timing and the cadence and the reporting, the public nature of all that does change a lot of things in terms of how you think about that. And there's so much time chewed up at the end of the quarter or the start of the next for that cycle that you don't have to deal with as a private company.
Yeah, the end of quarter
Oh yeah,
chaos is something I have
it's
experienced,
real.
so it is certainly real. And I referenced it there, and I don't think any tech-based podcasts can actually take place anymore without AI being a discussion point at some stage. And my daily job from a sales point of view has drastically changed in the last, I suppose, 24 months. As a company with SurveyMonkey, there's elements of my day-to-day job from a sales point of view, but also maybe more importantly, the clients I'm potentially getting on board, or maybe some of the current users of SurveyMonkey, they have AI-based questions or needs. How do you feel SurveyMonkey is approaching the conundrum that is AI? In most people's views, every company wants to stay ahead of it or one step ahead of it. How do you feel SurveyMonkey's getting on with that?
Yeah, I think we've done a good job, and the team was early in thinking about machine learning and AI going back a number of years. I think about AI for us and others similarly, that there's probably four big buckets that are relevant. The first is AI in the product. The things you'd expect to do are build with AI, analyze with AI, the ways you can leverage pardon me, AI to augment the product, again, in ways you'd expect today. We've done a really good job thinking about that, and we'll continue to iterate on that. The second piece is AI in the workplace. How do we use AI to make ourselves more efficient, to analyze our sales calls, to understand our data, to think about ways that we can extrapolate, to build presentations, to help on marketing? And we are doing, I think, a good job with lots of opportunities there to keep iterating and adding AI into our daily flow. The third is the evolution of where AI will take us from a user interface input. The classic software model is going to change, and hard to know exactly what that looks like, but thinking about how do we evolve, how do we stay ahead of that curve so that we are relevant in a world where agents are talking to agents, and that people are collecting feedback or doing other jobs in all kinds of different ways. And we're making that as useful and productive and simple in many cases for the customer. The last one is the data side. We are a massive company from a data standpoint, and I think we have opportunities to think about how we can leverage that to make the product better. And we've been doing that for years, and I think we have some more opportunities. We crossed 100 billion questions answered. We are different than a lot of things out there because it's humans answering questions structured in really interesting ways, and there's a lot of value in that data that I think there's opportunities there as well.
And in your opinion, how listen, if I'm down in the local pub or if I'm sitting down with my dad at the dinner table, the generic AI will take over every job on planet Earth soon. And you kind of referenced it there where humans are answering, say with SurveyMonkey, a lot of the time humans are answering our surveys and giving honest feedback, hopefully. I was only thinking there, how I feel today is completely different how I felt yesterday. Obviously, yesterday was my birthday,
Happy
so
birthday.
happy belated birthday to me and the slight
Mine
bias
was
there. But
4
my
days
point
ago, so
is,
we're close. I love it.
yeah. And the point I'm trying to make is that every day, every hour, emotion plays such a big part in how people communicate, how people view things. The most basic things can be easily affected by one's mood, which, to my extent, as much as you try hammer that into AI, it doesn't have that human element. And I think it is definitely something they want to try humanize AI with. But do you feel that's potentially the sticking point around AI and I suppose AI versus actual humans?
I do. I think that human input, human feedback is going to be more important than it's been over the last millennia. That we're getting into an age where you can replicate so much, but that's what it's doing. It's replicating what's existed before. So creativity, feedback, emotion, all these elements that we are innately born with, and those will be the elements that I think will evolve going forward and will become more and more important. And that optimistic view of AI is that we free up people for a lot of the more interesting tasks and roles and opportunities, and AI starts to take over in the rote things that it's been doing for a long time, and that we haven't called it AI as such, but there's certainly examples that exist that are basically what we call AI now. And the human element there, I'm a big believer, will always be really important. That feedback notion, that input is so critical, and it is different. I mean, what you get from the machines is not the same today. Quite good in many cases, but it's not the same.
Yeah, no, I agree. And as a podcast host, ChatGPT can sometimes try and write the questions
Yeah.
for you, but equally when you read them aloud, you're like, that's not what Richie
That's
would
yeah,
be
no, I know it's a
asking, or
wild
it wouldn't
thing,
sound like
and
that.
you read some of this stuff and you realize pretty quickly AI produced that. And so I've got two daughters, and they're both now becoming more and more suspect of what's AI created, and they hear things and think that it's clearly been AI driven, and I don't think they're going to be negatively biased against it, but they're really sensitive to it.
Yeah, that's what the young
Yeah,
generation have to contend with. Yeah, I'd like to see if I was in DC or you back in Princeton, what the AI slash ChatGPT landscape would be looking like.
yeah, no, I'm sure it's fascinating. I would love to see that in college right now.
Yeah. And when I told some of my friends I was having you on, Eric, they were obviously making puns about me not potentially saying the wrong thing in front of the CEO at the company I work for. But on a serious note, they were asking, and some of the people I know run businesses, they're CEOs themselves of these small companies. And as we said at the start of the podcast, you had your moments where you dealt with smaller companies and had to build them up. When you look at, say, the next generation of CEOs coming in, the 20-year-olds, the 25-year-olds who might be listening to this, hoping for some of the secret sauce, if you could leave them one principle behind for these upcoming CEOs, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I think it is maybe two things. I think that, or maybe three. The combination of creativity. How are you doing something that is different, that adds value for people, for customers? The curiosity to be open to new ideas, and the execution. Just the value of getting things done is extraordinary. And so much of that is about finding good people. I've seen a lot of people talk about how the first 20 people in a company shape what that company becomes. And you need people who are going to push you and challenge you and get things done. And at the end of the day, the best idea isn't always the one that wins. It's the one that is pushing harder and faster and moving forward and adapting as things change. And so I think that those three things can make, I don't care whether you're selling washing machines or building a software business or an AI agent that is helping with travel, whatever it is, those elements I think are critical.
Yeah, I'd agree. And lastly, before we finish with a few quick fire questions, with regards to the role you're in now with SurveyMonkey, do you ever think about the end game? If you were there in your last day in SurveyMonkey, whether that's in several months, several years, decades from now, do you ever think about I suppose, the legacy or what maybe success would look like in your position? Are you a bit more short term orientated?
I don't think about the the legacy as much. I mean, I would love people to enjoy working at a company that I'm at. I would love people to find success at a company that I'm working at, where I'm the CEO. And it's really important to me that people feel respected, that they feel included in that company, and that culture works for them and it works for the company. I am a competitive person, and winning is a big part of what drives me in big and little things. And so I, I think from the outcome, the company was bought by a private equity group, and they're looking for a financial return on that business, which comes in multiple forms. And I would very much like to mark a successful outcome for everyone's sake. And so, but I don't focus as much on the details of that, and that legacy of what that means is not as important to me as the experience of people day to day, both at the board level, at the management team level, and throughout the company, that there was a good and a positive and a learning and a valuable experience of growth for everyone's sake.
Yeah, I know I said it earlier in the podcast, but I think there's living proof to, you were saying, even the enjoyable aspect of working in a company where you're the CEO. And as I said, even coming on this podcast, I think it does obviously show an element of respect, but equally I think it shows there's going to be a huge amount of employees. And I'm not tooting my own horn here. It's people will see that we've talked. People will want to know what you have to say, what I have to ask, and ultimately to have that transparency. I think it goes a long way in instilling trust, and from your perspective, and from my opinion. So I do want to thank you for
Yeah,
that.
I appreciate it. No, and I love,
And
like I said, I love that you're doing this, and I'm very happy to. Definitely the first one I've done with an employee at the same company, which is fun.
yeah, this is the first time for everything. And I normally finish with quick fire questions. So the serious and heavy content will be pushed aside
Love it.
now. And there's just a few quick fire ones that, first thing that comes to your mind, feel free to shout it out. I've never had to edit out an answer, so there's no
All right.
pressure. But starting off, what is your favorite film or documentary involving monkeys?
Favorite film or documentary involving monkeys? Wow, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I'll go Planet of the Apes, the original.
Okay. The original, yeah. Classic. The favorite concert you've been to?
Uh, Beastie Boys with Tribe Called Quest opening for them in 1996.
Okay. Yeah. I'd love to see a Beastie Boys concert. I know that time's probably
Yeah,
gone,
that
but
was pretty
I'd
amazing.
say I'd imagine so. And if you could relive just one random workday from any of your previous jobs before SurveyMonkey, not necessarily because it was big, but just because it was fun or unique, what would it be?
The relive and redo was my last company was a ticketing live events business, and our very first show was the Eagles in Indianapolis. And I had one of the worst travel days of my life. I had flights canceled. And I missed it. And
Okay.
so I would redo that one, travel the day before, and get there for that.
Yeah. Fair. Lesson
Yeah,
learned,
yeah,
even though air travel will always find its best ways
exactly.
to
To ruin
screw
things. Yeah, it
things
was
up.
amazing. I'd given myself a lot of time too.
Yeah, can happen. The best Halloween costume you ever wore.
the man. Let's see. I did a good Ted Lasso recently and grew a pretty healthy mustache for that one. Probably the best though. Years ago, a buddy of mine and we dressed as Chips, which was a
Okay.
1970s 80s TV show about California Highway Patrol somehow, and we had good costumes. We walked into a party and the band stopped playing because they thought we were actual police. So it was a good one.
Mission
Yeah, exactly.
accomplished. I find the niche ones are always the
Right.
best. Like I don't know if you've ever seen Wet Hot American Summer.
Yes.
Yeah, I dressed up as someone from that, and no one at the whole party knew
No
who
one
I
knew.
was
Yeah.
except about three of my
Yeah.
friends, and they knew it straight away, and they thought it was the greatest thing ever.
I
So
love it.
sometimes the hidden gems are the
Yeah.
best. And second last question: one book every CEO should
Oh,
read.
one. So I will say my somewhat hot take is I don't really like business books because I think that the vast majority of them could be articles. There's lots of good points in them, but they end up stretching too long. But having said that,
Yeah.
I'd say Shoe Dog, which is Phil
Okay.
Knight's book about starting Nike. And it is such a testament to passion and expertise and finding ways to get things done. And the notion that you build something out of a novel idea and creativity, it's pretty extraordinary. So, uh, great read, great book. That's one that I would recommend.
Okay. And lastly, if you could ask yourself a question that I haven't asked you today, what would it be? Can be anything, by the
Oh
way.
man. Let's see if I could ask myself a question. Um, I wish I had a good answer for you right now. Um, yeah, I always like the what gets you up in the morning. Like, what are the real, what are the driving motivations on a given day of for anybody? And I think they're often similar, but we all have different versions for what keeps you motivated.
Okay, and
Yeah,
unfortunately,
I'm
I'm
gonna
going
have
to
to.
have to answer
I
that now.
realized
So,
we were heading that
what
direction. I
gets
just
you out
thought it
of
was
bed in the
presumptuous
morning?
for me to answer the. Um,
Yeah.
I, I mean, it sounds trite, but my family. It's the my. I've been lucky. We've got two great girls and a family that is tight. My wife and I have got. We've been together for a long time, and That's the driver of so much of what we do, how I think about things. And on top of that, I love working with the people that I get to work with. I mean, I think that goes back to that notion of working with kind people that you find joy in, and finding that on a day-to-day basis is really important.
Yeah, here to that. And is there anything, if people want to say follow you? I know on LinkedIn you're quite active, but if anyone was to keep tabs on what you're up to, is there any sites or any
Yeah,
pages
it's
best to follow
LinkedIn.
you
I
on?
don't do a lot. I haven't been on Instagram or Facebook for a while here, but I'm on LinkedIn and relatively active there. I think it's a good platform for people are good, honest, and relatively positive platform in general. So that's the best place if you're interested. So appreciate that.
Okay, well, I'll leave the link in the bio for
Awesome.
people who are interested. And yeah, Eric, that's it from my end. I do want to thank you. It genuinely does mean a lot that you did take time out to have a very open, very honest conversation. Outside of that, I'm obviously very excited to see what the next few months, years contains in SurveyMonkey, and hopefully both of us will contribute our fair share towards that. And yeah, no, listen, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope the remainder of the week is a good one.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Richie. It's great to do this with you, and appreciate you having me on.